the dense heart of the forest, where ancient trees whispered secrets and shadows moved with a life of their own, Mia found herself alone. She had ventured into these woods seeking solace, hoping to escape the noise of the world. But now, as twilight descended and the trees loomed taller, their branches entwining like skeletal fingers against the darkening sky, she realized she was lost. Every step seemed to lead her deeper into unfamiliar territory. The path she had followed had vanished into the undergrowth, leaving her surrounded by an eerie silence broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. Unnerved, Mia quickened her pace, her heart pounding in her chest like a drumbeat echoing through the stillness. She could feel eyes on her, an intense gaze that seemed to pierce through the gloom. Glancing over her shoulder, she caught a fleeting glimpse of something, a shape moving among the trees, half hidden yet undeniably there. Fear gripped her as she stumbled forward, branches clawing at her clothes, roots reaching up to trip her. The creature, whatever it was, seemed to be closing in. Mia dared not look back again, but she could hear its soft footfalls, keeping pace with hers, a predator toying with its prey. Suddenly, she broke into a clearing, a small oasis of moonlit grass surrounded by towering oaks. Gasping for breath, Mia turned to face her pursuer, her eyes wide with terror. And there, emerging from the shadows, was a figure. Unlike anything she had ever seen, a creature of myths and nightmares, its eyes gleaming with an otherworldly light. It stood tall and humanoid, yet its features were twisted, animalistic. Long claws tipped its fingers, and its skin seemed to blend with the shadows around it. Mia's voice caught in her throat as the creature advanced slowly, a malevolent intelligence gleaming in its gaze. Desperate, Mia stumbled backward, her mind racing for escape. With a sudden burst of adrenaline, she turned and ran, her feet flying over the forest floor, the creature's haunting cries echoing behind her. Branches whipped at her face, but she dared not slow down, her only thought to flee this nightmare come to life. Hours passed, or perhaps only minutes in the timeless embrace of the forest, until Mia finally burst through the trees, collapsing onto a dirt road. Gasping for breath, she glanced back into the darkness, half expecting to see the creature still there, watching, waiting. But there was nothing. Only the silent woods, their secrets buried once more in the deepening night. To this day, Mia cannot forget the terror of that night, nor shake the feeling that something watches her still, from the shadows of the forest that claimed her sanity and left her with a fear of the wild places that stretches far beyond the confines of her lost path. In the small town where I grew up, there was an old, abandoned house at the edge of the woods. Locals whispered about its dark history, a place where tragedy had struck decades ago. As teenagers, we dared each other to go inside, but no one ever had the nerve. Until one summer night, when curiosity got the better of us. It was me and 3 friends, Sarah, Mike, and Alex. We had spent the evening at a bonfire, swapping ghost stories and laughing off our fears. But as the night wore on, the stories took hold, and the allure of the old house became too strong to resist. Armed with flashlights and nervous laughter, we approached the looming silhouette of the house. Its windows were boarded up, the front door hanging off its hinges. We pushed our way inside, our footsteps echoing in the empty rooms. The air was stale and heavy with dust. Cobwebs hung like veils from the ceiling, and the floorboards creaked under our weight. We explored cautiously, half expecting to encounter something, anything, that would justify our fears. In one room, we found old furniture covered in sheets, as if frozen in time. In another, a staircase led up to the second floor, its steps groaning protest as we ascended. Shadows danced on the walls, cast by our trembling flashlights. As we reached the top, the atmosphere grew colder. A chill settled in the air, sending shivers down our spines. Sarah let out a nervous giggle, trying to break the tension. But then, we heard it, a faint whisper, like a bee. Against our ears. "Get out." The voice was barely audible, yet it echoed through the silence, freezing us in place. Panic surged through me as I turned to see the others pale-faced and wide-eyed. We exchanged terrified glances, each of us hoping the others had heard it too. Without a word, we fled down the stairs, stumbling over each other in our haste to escape. The darkness seemed to close in around us, pressing in with unseen hands. Behind us, we heard footsteps, slow and deliberate, as if something was following. We burst out of the house into the moonlit night, gasping for breath. The old house loomed behind us, silent and menacing. We didn't stop running until we were safely back at the bonfire, where the warmth of the flames chased away the chill of fear. That night, we vowed never to speak of what had happened inside that house. But the memory lingers, A reminder that some places hold secrets best left undisturbed, and that sometimes, the true horror lies not in what we see, but in what we feel in the depths of our souls. In the quiet countryside of Maine, there was a secluded cabin nestled deep within a dense forest. It belonged to my uncle, who often invited us to spend summers there. The cabin itself was rustic yet cozy, surrounded by towering pines and the soothing sounds of nature. But beyond the serene facade, there was a darkness that none of us could have imagined. One August, my cousin Emma and I decided to visit the cabin for a weekend getaway. We arrived on a Friday afternoon, greeted by the familiar scent of pine needles and the distant call of a loon on the lake. As evening fell, we settled in, sharing stories by the crackling fire and relishing the escape from city life. But as darkness enveloped the forest, a sense of unease crept over us. Emma, always adventurous, suggested we take a moonlit walk through the woods. Reluctantly, I agreed, hoping the fresh air would dispel my growing apprehension. We ventured into the woods, our footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of pine needles. The moon cast eerie shadows among the trees, and a chill wind whispered through the branches. Emma led the way with her flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness like a lifeline. After walking for what felt like hours, we stumbled upon a clearing we had never seen before, a small cemetery, hidden among the trees. Tombstones weathered with age stood silently, their inscriptions faded with time. Emma and I exchanged nervous glances, wondering who could be buried in such a remote place. As we approached one particularly old gravestone, Emma's flashlight flickered and died. Panic seized me as darkness closed in around us, suffocating and thick. We fumbled for our phones, desperate for any source of light. In the silence, we heard a rustling, a sound like footsteps on fallen leaves, growing closer with each passing second. Heart pounding, I turned to Emma, whose face was pale with fear. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the pounding in my ears. Before I could respond, a voice echoed through the trees, a low, mournful wail that sent shivers down my spine. Emma grabbed my arm, her grip vice-like. "We need to go," she said urgently, her eyes wide with terror. We turned and ran blindly through the forest, branches clawing at our clothes, roots threatening to trip us at every step. Behind us, the unearthly wail followed, growing louder with each frantic heartbeat. Just as I feared we would never escape, Emma stumbled on a gnarled root and fell hard to the ground. I turned back to help her, but a cold dread gripped me as I saw the figure emerging from the shadows, a spectral figure, its form shifting and indistinct, yet undeniably malevolent. With a scream, I reached for Emma, but it was too late. The creature descended upon us with a chilling shriek, its touch like ice on my skin. Emma and I were enveloped in darkness, our voices silenced forever in the depths of that haunted forest. The next morning, search parties combed the woods, finding only our abandoned flashlights and the chilling stillness of the cemetery. The cabin stood silent and empty, a testament to the horror that had unfolded in the night. And somewhere in those ancient woods, our spirits lingered, forever bound by the darkness that had claimed us. It was October when my best friend Rachel and I decided to spend a weekend at the old cabin in the mountains. We hadn't been there in years, and the locals had always whispered about strange happenings in the woods. But we were used to this place, and we shrugged it off. That night, as the wind howled outside, we sat by the fire, but Rachel kept glancing nervously toward the windows. "I keep thinking something's out there," she said, her voice trembling. I laughed it off, until I saw it too. A figure, moving just beyond the trees. We decided to turn in, but in the middle of the night, a loud bang woke me. I heard Rachel's voice, muffled, terrified, whispering from downstairs. "Lily, help me." I crept down the stairs and found her standing in the living room, staring at the wall. Her eyes were wide with terror, her body frozen. Then, I saw it, something shifting on the far wall, a dark, twisted shape with impossibly long limbs. Its face was blurred, but its eyes gleamed with hunger. I called to Rachel, but her head snapped unnaturally to the side. Her neck cracked, and she turned to me with a wide, grotesque smile, rows of rotting teeth. "It's coming," she whispered, before lunging at me. I fought, but she was stronger, dragging me toward the thing on the wall. It reached for me, its fingers brushing my skin, sending an icy chill through my body. I broke free and ran, but the thing grabbed my wrist, pulling me back into the shadows. Rachel's face twisted with something not human, her smile growing wider. And then everything went cold. The next morning, the search party found nothing, Just our scattered belongings in an empty cabin. Some say the woods are cursed, and the cabin never truly abandoned. They say it waits for the next unlucky soul to wander in. If you listen closely, you can still hear us, whispers in the wind.